Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We would like to extend a very warm welcome to each one of you at the nice global conclave from the labs of the beautiful Himalayas, where the Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement is located. The think tank was established in the month of February in the year 2016. It undertakes independent research in the field of international relations, foreign policy, security studies, and development. NICE has 4 research centers: China Studies, Neighborhood Studies, Non-Traditional Security Studies, and Security and Strategic Studies. The institute focuses on 8 research topics: climate change and energy, global governance, sustainable development and smart cities, refugee and migration, China's Belt and Road Initiative, border and transboundary water politics, Indo-Pacific affairs, disaster management, and international economy and development. Previously, NICE has had the opportunity to host distinguished speakers from all around the globe.
It was a great pleasure inviting me to speak here at NICE.
It's a real pleasure to be able to speak with all of you.
But thank you anyway, and I certainly admire the work that you're doing.
I'm very happy to be with you all.
NICE Global Conclave is the flagship event of Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement. The theme of the 3-day conference is Connecting Nepal to the World, with the aim to bring the leaders, diplomats, business leaders, and scholars from all around the globe. The objective of the conclave is to introduce Nepal to the world and at the same time update the Nepalese policymakers and experts about the fast-changing geopolitics, which will help Nepal reshape its foreign policy to achieve its national goals. This is the session E of the conference. And to chair and moderate this session, it's a real pleasure to have Professor Dr. B.R. Deepak here with us. Professor Dr. B.R. Deepak is professor and chair at the Center for Chinese and Southeast Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. He was trained in Chinese history and India-China relations at the Peking University and Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, Beijing, at Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and University of Edinburgh, UK. He has several publications. Without any further ado, I request the chair to take over.
Thank you, host. I hope I'm loud and clear. It has been a wonderful day for me to start with the morning session, which was the rise of China. I think the Belt and Road Initiative is the extension of the same heading, and as rightly pronounced by various scholars and including leaders, the project of the century has invited varied responses from different stakeholders. If the geoeconomics of the project has attracted people from around the world, especially from the developing countries, and of course some of the developed countries that are also there, the geopolitics around this project has also gaining currency of late, and sometimes has been attracting attention of various countries and some of the neighbors, those who have been a little discomfort with this project also. But going by the figure, I may be a little, maybe late as far as updating my figures. I still carry the figures provided by Ning Jizhen, who is the Statistical Bureau chief in China. According to his figures, the project is going on quite smoothly and nicely. So far, China has concluded 118 agreements with 103 countries. The figure may have changed now. Professor Wang is here, a good friend from Beijing. He may correct myself later during his speech. And 20,000 plus projects have been undertaken across the world, which is massive, with a capital of almost 410 billion US. And according to Mr. Ning Zhan, the execution rate of these projects is over 90%. So that is massive. So I think, without going too much details, in fact, myself have edited a book and a couple of chapters on Belt and Road Initiative. And it was a pleasure to have Professor Wang Yiwei on board for a chapter where he discussed in detail the challenges the project may face or are facing in present context. So without much delay, I would set a few rules for the panelists. I think please be within the time and don't exceed to 12 to 13 minutes so that we could have some time for discussion. And maybe less than a minute when the time is about to up, I may hint, to the speaker that you please wrap it up so that we can have good discussion. So without any delay, so may I first include Professor Dr. Wang Yiwei to deliver his address. Professor Wang, over to you.
Thank you, Professor Deepak, and thank you for the invitation of night. Long time no see. We hope to meet maybe soon in person. I would like to use the 3R to identify the BRI after the pandemic. The first R is resilient. People talk about globalization. It's not driven by the so-called new liberalism anymore. I like to identify this is a Washington consensus based off capital, by capital, and for capital globalization. Of course, simply global financial crisis is our troubles. But after the breakout of the pandemic, this is the end, people said. So now people talk about the resilience of the globalization, diversification of global supply chain, and even I use maybe globalization, global regionalization. So it's not just a globalization, that's the in general. So for the BRI also resilient. The one example is the China-Europe Rail Express, 10 years now it's anniversary. At the beginning, many people question about the efficiency, the costs, but now last year 51% growing. So far, there are more than 40,000 turns to connect more than 190 cities. So now this, because of the air prohibited, the sea also low efficiency. So during the pandemic crisis, the BRI increasing the China-Europe Rail Express is one of the good example. At the beginning, of course, the pandemic makes so many challenges. People cannot move freely, and also the goods also cannot move freely. So now we have a so-called green light and fast track to make sure the engineering and workers and can move freely without necessary so-called 14 days quarantine, start from here and then land. So this causes many troubles. We have some special arrangements with the BRI partners. So that kind of, I think, is resilient for BRI as well. Second, R, I think it's reassure the high quality of development. Reiterate, I think the so-called the high quality of BRI development. There's a second BRI forum 3 years ago highlight. the meaning is we just not rely on just the capital invest or labor, cheap labors, or resource full of resources. That kind of consumer of resources, labors, and also money. So this is called not high quality. So-called high quality means we pay high attention to the green Silk Road and pay high attention private companies, private capitals, and also high quality of the infrastructure building. So now it's more focused on the digital infrastructure. I think that's very important. China also, we initiate so-called dual circulation strategy. That means majority of the Chinese economic growth, not from abroad, more and more from the consumer, because we have 400 million middle class in by 2035 will be double, so 800 million middle class by 2035. So consumer will be driving forces for Chinese economic growth, not just the exports, trade, or FDI. And then the BRI also, because of the high quality orientation, so it's not just the causing areas actively participant from China, like Yangtze River, Pure River, Delta Economic Zone, or Beijing, Tianjin, and Hebei, that kind of driving forces for China's economic growth. But now even Chongqing, Chengdu, inland cities, some as be the pioneers of the BRI cooperation with BRI with other countries. So we high quality after the pandemic. We are more highlights of the regionalization, like RCEP. Even China and the European Union reached a comprehensive investment treaty. So now it's waiting for the approval by the European Parliament, now suspended because of the sanctions, anti-sanctions political trouble. But sooner or later will be approved, I'm sure. And also China declared to join the CPTPP negotiation. I'm thinking maybe next year, United States will come back of the negotiation with CPTPP. So that's a very high standard of regionalization, particularly in some new areas like e-commerce, digital economy, AI, and all this WTO without arrangement or rules before. So I think the high quality reassurance. Third R, I think it's a transformation, re-transformation. So-called re-transformation because BRI always transform according to the needs of the other countries, according to the globalization transform. But now we say transformation. The meaning is after the pandemic crisis, every country highlights three new areas. First is digital, because people cannot contact directly. So digital, like online conference, education, medical, everything. So digital Silk Road. China, we have 1 billion netizens. After the pandemic crisis, Chinese digital technology and platform and economy increase rapidly. So many experience we can share with BRI partners. Second, of course, is for green recovery. I think the pandemic, the reason is because people and the nature relations should be readjusted. So climate change maybe it's one of the reasons for the pandemic of the virus. So green, Chinese government also declared to reach the carbon neutrality by 2035, and academics 2035, 2060 neutrality of carbon emission. Third is for the health. It's more people-oriented, people's health. So the vaccine and the masks, all kinds of this, not just for the trade, but also corporate, even like 17+1 China CE countries cooperation. Hungary be the Chinese vaccinate the be made in Hungary and then distribute to other European countries. Many other like Dubai be a center of not just innovation but also vaccinate producing distribution. All of this, I think that's very important. So far, China sells more than 290 billion masks to other countries. Many of them is a donation, foreign assistance, because many poor countries. So Chinese government declared that vaccines should be the public goods. That means it's not a commercial goods. It's not just make money. So it should be accessible to every country, particularly for the poor people, poor countries. And the second, affordable. So it can be used conditions to match the local conditions. So that thing is very important. So digital Silk Road, green Silk Road, and health Silk Road for health. This I think also because of the transformation of the globalization. So these three R's I think be priorities for the BRI. Now I'll come back to the chairman's question about the challenges, risks in the coming future. I think also the three major challenges for BRI after a pandemic crisis. Firstly, is traditionally we think about BRIs to reform the globalization, make it more inclusive, make it more mutual benefit, make it more balanced, make it more open. But now it's not globalization. People think about a deglobalization. Particularly for the United States, they have a so-called de-channelized global supply chain. Even people worry about a so-called decouple. They want to have a new globalization, which led by the United States, a so-called Quad or transatlantic everything. It's just some of the arrangements. So the BRI to reform the globalization, now they have the new globalization, how to adapt that kind of a situation, big challenges. In the last week in the G7 UK, they have so-called B3W to build a better world. Of course, we are welcome more countries to participate, even competition, invest more in the real economy, particularly infrastructure. The problem is people worry about even the United States, their lack of their infrastructure building investment. How can they invest for other countries? It's not China's advantage is not just one area, comprehensive. I think the most importantly, China has all of the categories of the industrial sectors according to the United Nations. So industrial powers today still China produced nearly 1/3 of all the industrial values in the world. So that I think that's the reason China's building made in China is most efficient and cheapest in the world. So, but US definitely they want hedging the BRI and make sure the other countries take side between China and the United States, or so-called the Western BRI or Chinese BRI. So it's so-called two systems. One system is BRI system, another is a US-led new global system. So that definitely biggest challenge for BRI. Second, I think the transformation, as I mentioned, we need digital Silk Road for health and green Silk Road. However, BRI partners, most of them developing countries, they are quite relatively poor. They need to industrialize. How can then for green recovery, digital, all everything? This is for advanced economy. Maybe it's the transformation goal. So it's a dilemma. But now we stopped all the investment of the traditional carbon intensive factories. For instance, in Bangladesh, so coal factories, Chinese investment stopped because this cause more CO2 emission. But how to build new electricity, low carbon, is a challenge. The new energy maybe is too expensive for the poor countries. So this is, I think, a huge challenge. The third challenge, I think, the BRI facing is the Chinese economy. we say dual circulation strategy. Chinese economic growth is not higher as before. Before is around 10% of the economic growth, right? Now, last year, even the only positive economic growth. This year, maybe 8%, but still, we highlight the high quality open reform. Chinese economic growth driving forces also changing. So traditional BRI, traditional cooperation mechanism, we also need to readjust for. So the 6 economic corridors, which is according to the Chinese comparative advantages and the hosting countries' comparative advantage designing. Now we may be more focused on the air and digital mutual connectivity from all rounds of the mutual connectivity cooperation. So that's also big challenge for the BRI cooperation. So far, according to the new data, I suggest you can access to yidaiyilu.gov.cn. This is official website. Yidaiyilu is Chinese pinyin of the Belt Road Initiative, the YIDAIYILU.gov.cn. There have the updates data. For instance, President Xi's speech in the APEC BRI cooperation and State Councilor Wang Yi, all these new data they can update. So I'm not repeat that kind of data. It's easy for you to access. And I just mentioned about this and welcome your questions and discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Wang, for your insights. I remember, you were the first advocatory of this digital Silk Road in your book, which you published long back in 2015. And it was wonderful to have a copy from you. I have some questions, or maybe I'll reserve them, for the end. So may I have the pleasure to invite our second speaker, Dr. Gulbin Sultana. Dr. Sultana, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Pramod Jaiswal and Dcnepal for giving me this opportunity to share my views with this distinguished panel. And this is, we just heard one very wonderful presentation, and I think this topic is Belt and Road Initiative is a very important topic in today's context. Now, since the Belt and Road Initiative has been launched since 2014, lots of debates and assumptions are being there related to this concept. One of the most talked about issues is the small countries falling into the debt trap policy of China's Chinese debt trap diplomacy. And the second is the political issues the countries are having by becoming a partner of Belt and Road Initiative. And third is strategic repercussions many of the countries are having by becoming a partner of Belt and Road Initiative. Now, all these points are basically made while referring to the small countries. Sri Lanka and Maldives, these two are very important, strategically important countries in the Indian Ocean and the smaller countries. So today I'm going to focus my presentation on the experience of these two countries, because these two countries, they have joined BRI project in 2014. Particularly when somebody talks about Belt and Road Initiatives, negative repercussion, Sri Lanka's example has been given. So let me focus on my presentation on the 3 points I have made and how they are applicable in case of Sri Lanka and Maldives. But before that, let me address one basic question: why China is interested to pursue Maldives and Sri Lanka as its partner in the BRI project. Now, we all know China under Xi Jinping is seeking market to export its industrial overcapacity to overseas market and foster new sources of growth for the economy. To fulfill this vision, China requires connectivity of Asian, African, and European continents and their adjacent seas for free flow of trade. In this regard, China is looking for facilities along strategic transit channels through land use agreements between Chinese state-owned companies and local authorities to mitigate geoeconomic risks and fostering energy security. Additionally, China also has a vision to become a maritime global maritime power. In this regard, PLNAV needs reliable logistical chains to resupply food, fuel, and armaments across the sea lines of communication. Now, we all know China has its limitations in the Indian Ocean area. Hence, it requires building of logistical infrastructure at strategic locations in the Indian Ocean. As I mentioned before, Sri Lanka and Maldives, both these countries are strategically located islands in the Indian Ocean. The two countries are located in the busy east-west trade route, and they are located in the close proximity of India. And both Sri Lanka and Maldives, they are part of ancient Silk Road. So because of all these factors, I think China is interested to take both Sri Lanka and Maldives as partner of its BRI project. Now, let me address the next question. Why Sri Lanka and Maldives, they are interested to be part of this initiative? Now, the leadership in both cases, it could be observed that the leadership of the two countries during that time in 2014, when the BRI was announced, saw immense benefit to extend support to Chinese in jointly building the Belt and Road, as the initiative was seen in line with the ambitious developmental vision both the leaders in power in both the countries. During that time, Sri Lanka's president was Mahinda Rajapaksa, and Maldives president was President Abdullah Yamin. So they had an ambitious developmental goal for their vision for their respective countries. Mahinda Rajapaksa had the vision to make Sri Lanka a maritime, aviation, commerce, energy, and knowledge hub. And he felt that his five-fold hub concept coincides with China's proposal to build the 21st century maritime Silk Road. Abdullah Yamin similarly had a vision for developing the development of his infrastructure development in his country. He wanted to relocate more than 70% of country's population in a reclaimed island called Hulu Male City near the capital Male. In this regard, he wanted to have post-mega infrastructure projects, including airports, bridge, and housing project to accommodate the population and provide facilities in Hulu Male and to connect Male, Hulu Male, and Hulule, where the main airport is located. But interestingly, at that point of time, both the leaders, they were under the international scrutiny because of their authoritarian way of ruling the country. Because of that, the required foreign assistance in terms of investment and financial aid were not coming from the Western countries or EU. But at that point of time, China was the only country which was readily available to provide financial assistance, particularly in terms of investment, without having any conditions or without interfering in the internal affairs of these two countries. So because of that reason, I think these two leaders, they were interested to be part of the Belt and Road Initiative. But interestingly, after these two leaders, both of them got defeated and the new government came into power. There was a presidential election in 2015 in Sri Lanka, and there was a presidential election in 2018 in Maldives. In both the elections, these two leaders got defeated and a new leadership came into power. They formed the government. And interestingly, the leaders who formed the government, during their election campaign, they were extremely critical about these BRI projects in both the countries, in Sri Lanka and Maldives. But And in fact, in Sri Lanka, the leaders who came into power after the election said that they were going to review the project. But after forming the government, both the governments in both the countries, they declared their intention to continue with the BRI project and intensify their relations with China. Now, in my understanding, one of the reasons was because after forming the government, the governments in both the countries, they realized that if they have to review the BRI projects, or they have to withdraw from the BRI, there will be a huge economic repercussion for them. And that is why, and also the National Unity Government, which came into power after 2015 presidential election in Sri Lanka, they promised millions of jobs. They promised for economic growth, economic development, and initially their plan was to have those to fulfill their vision, their goal, by getting investments and assistance not only from China but from other countries like Western countries, EU, US, and by restoring the relations with these two countries, because under Mahinda Rajapaksa period, the relations with these two countries deteriorated. But unfortunately, even though the relations with these countries were restored, but required investment was not coming for Sri Lanka. And even that time, China was the only country which was ready to invest in Sri Lanka. So that is why, and also I think the Sri Lankan National Unity Government that time was under compulsion. It's not that they did not try to review the projects, but when they tried to review the projects, they felt that they will have to suffer a lot, because and here in a while I'm going to talk about how China actually used this situation to influence Sri Lanka. But in Maldives also, we have seen that after coming into power, the new government, they have said that they are going to continue with the BRI projects. But now the relationship, their foreign policy is kind of tilted towards India, and we have seen that some of the agreements, for example, free trade agreement which was signed with China by Maldivian President Yamin, that was kind of not implemented. The current Maldivian administration also amended their national laws review their national laws, which were having, which are related to Belt and Road Initiative, and which were having negative repercussions. But even then, they are going to continue with the BRI project. That's what the government has announced. Now, let me focus on the 3 points in the starting of my presentation. I mentioned about the 3 points: debt policy, smaller countries falling into debt diplomacy, and the political repercussion and strategic repercussion. Now, in case of Sri Lanka, interestingly, Sri Lanka is facing a huge debt burden. It's a major issue for them, how to repay the debts and all. But interestingly, the Sri Lankans, both the current administration and also many of the economic experts, they refuse, they deny the argument that Sri Lanka has fallen under China's debt trap, because their argument is that China is not the largest creditor for Sri Lanka, and the debt burden which is Sri Lanka is facing right now, it's not because of the China funded projects. These are basically multilateral organizations. They are the main reason for the debt burden. And also, basically, debt diplomacy is debt trap is basically means that falling into a situation when a country is unable to repay the debt, and by compromise their sovereignty. Now, in that context, the Sri Lankans also argue that by being partner of Belt and Road Initiative, Sri Lanka's sovereignty is not under threat, because whatever lands Chinese state-owned companies are acquiring because of the projects by signing the agreement, they are not under China's sovereignty. They are very much under Sri Lanka's jurisdiction. They are part of Sri Lanka, so sovereignty is also not an issue because for them. But here, my argument is slightly different. While I agree with the Sri Lankan view that China is not the largest creditor, and maybe at this point of time, Sri Lanka's sovereignty is also not under threat because of the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, but Sri Lanka has definitely is definitely a victim of China's debt diplomacy, because if we if we see the 2015-2016, when the new government came into power, they wanted to review some of the Chinese projects. And that time the economic situation was so bad, they were having the balance of payment crisis. Foreign currency reserve were also, the decline. So at that point of time, the National Unity government requested China to write off some of the debts, and they also expressed their intention to review the flagship project, that is Colombo Port City project in Sri Lanka. But China that time not only refused to write off the debt, but also compelled Sri Lanka to sign equity swap agreement on Hambantota. By signing the agreement, Sri Lanka gave away 70% of 70% of its stake, port stake, to the Chinese state-owned company, and also China that time kind of threatened to impose a heavy compensation if Sri Lanka decides to review the Colombo Port City project or cancel the Colombo Port City project. So ultimately, they could not cancel the project. They signed a fresh agreement on Colombo Port City project, and in place of that 125 million compensation which was demanded by China, they had to provide, Sri Lankans had to provide 2-hectare additional land, reclaimed land, to the Chinese company. So I gave this example to substantiate my argument that China has kind of used this situation, Sri Lanka's situation, where Sri Lanka found it extremely difficult to repay the loans, to influence Sri Lanka. So kind of, yes, sir? Yeah, I'll finish it. So that is kind of, may not be falling into debt trap, but it's kind of falling into Sri Lanka is a victim of China's debt diplomacy. And of course, my second point was that the political repercussion and strategic repercussions. Now, definitely the China-funded BRI projects are part of political debate. In fact, in the presidential elections and even parliamentary elections, the projects were debated. They were part of election agenda. And many people actually argue that Mahinda Rajapaksa got defeated because of this BRI project. But my stand here is these projects are just a part of, one aspect. It cannot be, they are not the only reason for their defeat. There are some other reasons, the way, they were dealing with the domestic politics. So the Chinese built on leadership, but definitely they are part of political debate in both the countries. Because even after the election, when the equity swap agreement was being signed, there was a huge protest by the civil society members, by the opposition political parties, trade union leaders, and it was violent too. So definitely there is a political repercussions of these projects. The political debate is going on. But here I would like to mention just one point, that when we say there's a political debate, we have to remember that in Sri Lanka, the protests against these projects are not so much against the Chinese or the BRI concept as such. The protests are against the government because of their failure because it is believed that this BRI has a potential to provide economic benefit to Sri Lanka, but government's inefficient dealing and a lack of vision, corrupt practices. Because of all this reason, government is not able to make out maximum, take maximum out of these projects. So the protest is kind of more against the government, but not against the China's BRI concept. And my third point is that strategic repercussion. Definitely in Sri Lanka and Maldives, I think that is a fear even in Sri Lanka. They fear that by this BRI projects, the way government is handling it, it's this. They are making Sri Lanka as a theater of big power competition, though they don't want to be part of big power competition, because the way Chinese are making inroad, it's getting the attention of other stakeholders in the Indian Ocean who wants to have some kind of influence in the Indian Ocean, also in Sri Lanka and also in Maldives. So here, since I don't have much time, probably I could explain and elaborate many things during question answer session. My final comment here is that in Sri Lanka and Maldives, in Maldives, I have realized that this BRI projects are more of political debate, because the common people, the negative repercussions, strategic repercussions or political repercussions, they are part of political debate, because the common people, they haven't faced any direct impact as of now, like the Sri Lankans, because of the projects like Colombo Port City project, many fishermen, they lost their livelihood. There are environmental aspects, and also common people are also feeling. So it's a like debate is it's like broader in Sri Lanka compared to Maldives. So and my final comment is that though by BRI, though China says that it tries to create interdependency, but in case of Sri Lanka and Maldives, I have observed that it's actually creating kind of dependency of these two countries towards China, because the BRI infrastructure investment, infrastructure development is just one part of BRI project. Both the countries have agreed to enter into cooperation with China, mutual beneficial cooperation with China in all areas under this BRI framework. So in that context, the defense cooperation, cultural cooperation, the educational and everything, I think they are doing it under BRI framework. And that's how I feel that the two countries are actually becoming more and more dependent on China. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sultana, for bringing in the small country perspective of the BRI. They're quite interesting. I hope it must have generated a lot of questions, from other participants from the smaller countries. So we'll move to the third speaker of the panel, Dr. Maria Adele Carrai. So can I have the pleasure to invite Dr. Maria? Dr. Maria is there or no? It appears, Dr. Maria, am I audible or not? Okay, so it appears that Dr. Maria is not there. So meanwhile, then we'll move to the next speaker. Next speaker is Professor Dr. Minhas Majeed Khan. Professor Minhas, over to you then.
Thank you, Professor Deepak. Assalamu alaikum, good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all the participants. Indeed, it is a very important topic that NICE has gathered participants, scholars, and experts from around the globe for discussion. I would be focusing more on CPEC, as Dr. Sultana mentioned the debt trap case of Singapore and also discussed Maldives situation. So while discussing Belt and Road Initiative, it of course can provide support to Pakistan's population that is poor, and approximately 25.5 million out of 221.8 million Pakistani citizens live below the national poverty line. And this poverty or indigence is particularly widespread in the rural areas of Pakistan, which houses almost 2/3 of the national population. Due to persistent fiscal deficit, Pakistan has not been able to implement appropriate anti-poverty and welfare measures. So currently, Pakistan lacks an umbrella. Social protection institution, which while state loan schemes exclude many rural inhabitants whose economic activity is largely informal and temporary. So it is hoped, and I hope that Belt and Road Initiative will facilitate positive changes in terms of infrastructure development, poverty alleviation, industrialization, modernization of transport system throughout the countries that it will pass through, and self-sufficiency in energy sectors of many of the countries, including Pakistan. Now, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, as we always say, is the flagship project of China's Belt and Road Initiative. And it envisages economic growth and development in Pakistan. But rather, I would say that it is a win-win kind of game and situation for both Pakistan and China. Because if it is about Pakistan, one can say that Pakistan's geostrategic location provides China alternate routes for oil and gas supplies, from access to energy-rich Persian Gulf regions. Under the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, the value of various projects is worth 87 billion US dollars as of 2020. Beside this project, since it is a trunk passageway connecting the Silk Road economic belt in the north with the 21st century maritime Silk Road in the south. So it is expected to further strengthen trade and economic cooperation in regional states. When the corridor is constructed, it will serve as a primary gateway for trade between China and Middle East and Africa, because it has this project, CPEC project, has important impact on regional states, trade and energy security, and it will create economic security for Pakistan more as compared to energy and other issues. So the project of CPEC, the deep sea port at the Gwadar harbor, as well as the Iran-Pakistan pipeline, gas pipeline, I think are encouraging and favorable developments, in addition to new prospects intended for the energy and economic security for Pakistan as well as Chinese government in the region. However, more than a few prospective and possible dangers, as well as challenges, could disturb the carrying out of these developments. As far as CPEC is concerned, there are some common reservation on CPEC, including transparency and non-availability of complete information, mostly to the general public, I would say. Some believe that only one province will be a major beneficiary and the other would be ignored in the country. And there are others who consider that country would be under heavy external debt and loans due to this mega project. In the same way, the energy projects missed the hydro side, and the main focus was on coal and oil-based projects due to strong oil lobbies, which affected and increased oil prices for the general public and industry in the country. Hydro resources, I believe, should be focused with long-term planning, with the help and the guidance of Water and Power Development Authority of Pakistan. All these concerns and the external factors that I would be discussing has led to Chinese concern over the, particularly over the negative propaganda in media, not only by local but international forces as well. So this corridor, I would say, faces challenges, especially related to security. And the regional countries' concerns or apprehension about this project of China. The first and the foremost security challenge it has is nonetheless related to, because of course, India and Pakistan relation. So it is related to Indian factor due to multiple reasons. The question arises that what are the dominant causes and sequences of the processes of domestic resistance to CPEC in Balochistan and other key areas of conflict around the project. So it is not only Pakistan, in Pakistan, but certain other quarters also suggest that New Delhi's support to insurgent groups in Balochistan will interrupt this key project, mainly to counterbalance the growing influence of China and destabilize Pakistan economic growth. And one of the reason for India and US strategic partnership is believed to be this joint project of China and Pakistan. Moreover, India, previously India, as the international media has also written a lot about it, that India has been involved in various activities in Balochistan, and it is believed that India is supporting terrorist groups for killing and kidnapping of Pakistani and Chinese workers. Furthermore, we cannot ignore the internal issues, some of which I already have discussed. But the weak domestic policies of Pakistan also encourage and give space to insurgent groups to conduct such activities. Islamabad needs to strengthen the political institutions and should use the advanced method of intelligence gathering and sharing to secure this mega project. So beside that, I think Pakistan and China both must contemplate all external and internal features which can bully the recognition and realization of these schemes and developments to efforts improved as well as further meticulously together, in addition to guarantee improved and enhanced application as well as accomplishment of current contracts and arrangements in a well-timed manner. Beside this, we have to comprehend as a citizen of Pakistan whether the new fangled growth and expansion in the Pakistan-China relationship is a game changer that would bring transformation in China's strategic economic influence in the oil abundance region of Middle East, whether it would be beneficial for China, would it bear fruits for Pakistan, and so many other questions. Because as I earlier mentioned, it is considered this project is considered to be a win-win game or situation for both the countries. Also, it is a matter of fact that Pakistan, for the predictable future, possibly can play an important part in the foreign policy of Chinese government as well as commitment in the abundant region of Middle East. The factual prospects presented through Pakistan and China commitment is that it brought variation in the possibility of Chinese impact and effect as of geoeconomic to geostrategic. Also, the combined schemes and projects would have a noteworthy and momentous transformative influence on stressing its sphere of effect and inspiration in the region of Middle East, South in addition to Central Asia, the Indian Ocean in addition to away from that region. So to conclude, I would say that the Chinese government is by this time effective in influencing foreign policy of Pakistan, as demonstrated in the situation of Yemen, civil war, as well as the normalization and stabilization procedure through Afghanistan. On the other hand, the genuine game changer is not the purpose of creating combined undertaking and project. It is their well-timed putting into practice that has the prospect and possibilities to produce a regional impression. And that is very important for regional development, peace, and prosperity, not only for these two countries, but also the regional countries and regions connected to this region as well. With this, I'll thank you all. If there are questions, I'll be happy to respond to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Minhas, for flagging in internal as well as external concerns of the CPEC. And whether it would be a game changer or not, I think the time will decide. But as a China watcher, I think what it has done to Pakistan-China relationship is that it has changed the so-called monodimensional relationship and diversified it into so many other areas. I think that is for sure. Well, thank you for your insightful presentation. Now, moving further, may I have the pleasure to invite Choodamani Bhattarai ji. He is the editor-in-chief of Dcnepal. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Distinguished audience, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great privilege and honor to be here today. My sincere thanks to NICE for inviting me as a speaker on BRI. Because of the time factor, I would like to jump into the subject. It is known fact that BRI is an ambitious project of Chinese President Xi Jinping to expand Chinese influence in periphery and around the world to become a superpower. Three things are involved in it: initiative, investment, and infrastructure development. All three I's are augmented trade between countries with China through connectivity, communications, and commerce. Why China needs to be enhanced infrastructure connectivity? Well, it is clear that China has a massive economy, and to keep running requires a massive inflow of resources. So China needs to look around the region and its periphery so that it can siphon the needed resources with ease. Particularly in South Asia, I believe the first thing it has done is raise the security dilemma of two powers, India and the US. Why? India thinks South Asia always has been its sphere of influence. Any other strong presence raises eyebrow in India. India fears that China will undermine India's influence and leverage in the region, and it will go against Indian national interests. Both countries have already tense situation in their borders. The gain for China in the region automatically will be equated as a loss for India and the US as well. I mentioned USA here because being the superpower, the US has already launched the Indo-Pacific strategy that aims to curtail the expansion of Chinese influence in Indo-Pacific region. Several US Pacific commanders have directly mentioned how China is a threat to the commerce and connectivity of the region, and how it is in the best interest of US to curtail China's influence as much as possible. India and the US are now peddling the death trap argument to make aware the smaller nations from China's BRI. They claim that through BRI, China will provide loans, but will automatically trap countries with debt and take undue advantage of the debt leverage and exploit the country. That argument, however, I believe is a bit hypocritical because both India and US have massive debt they owe to China. The smaller countries too are not buying into the debt trap argument because they are saying, hey, you guys are fine with Chinese loans. So what's wrong with us trying to get some for our development? If not the Chinese, then you guys are giving us loans on similar terms and conditions. But if we are not providing, then you should not impose on us. But then again, debt trap argument is not completely false. BRI cannot be imputed as an altruistic Chinese endeavor. In fact, it is a strategic agenda to gain power through economic influence. Sri Lanka's Hambantota seaport lease to Chinese is a showcased example, but there are other alarming cases too. As we discussed earlier, Maldives, as per the report of Center for Global Development, is one of the 8 countries that are at risk due to continuous Chinese lending and can suffer from debt stress. It's 80% of external debt is owed to China. This provides China huge leverage over Maldives. Other countries listed are like Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Laos, Tajikistan, and so on. So the security dilemma of these 2 powers in particular is having a great impact on the smaller countries, because now it is a tussle between China that wants to get these countries on board, and other 2 countries, India and the US, they want to prevent the countries from joining in. This wrangling, of course, is leading towards instability and insecurity within the countries. China, I believe, is providing a mix of aid, loan, and co-investment for this project. They will ask the countries themselves to finance a significant portion of it. There is suspicion that such mega project could involve opaque deals made, and the lack of transparency could instigate major disenchantment, which in turn could become a major risk to the project. Massive corruption could fuel resentment within communities that might aid to the security risks of the project. Most of the countries of South Asia already have a huge trade deficit with China. The BRI project are likely to use Chinese capital, labor, goods, and services. Thus, that is believed will further raise the deficit and thereby increase the economic vulnerability of the country. And economic vulnerability means a national security risk. I also want to add that as part of the BRI, China aims to create certain economic corridor in the region, as we earlier discussed about CPEC. The creation of economic corridor brings countries close towards China through this economic alliance. The security dilemma of the countries would naturally increase because the fear that economic alliance will evolve into a military alliance into the future, just like Quad or NATO. That will compel the other powers to sabotage that prospect in any way possible in order to prevent the countries from including towards China and coming together as alliance. As seen in many parts of the globe, China tends to take their own labor to build these mega infrastructures project. There are multiple instances where there have been social conflict between these laborers and host communities as well. That would give rise to insecurity and the societal level for sure. The environmental factor about these projects too needs to be revisited. Displacement of communities could be a part of many of these projects. That too could increase disenchantment and could be a trigger for conflict and increase insecurity. In conclusion, it might increase more conflict in South Asia if 2 giants of the region do not sit and talk frequently and resolve the issue themselves on the basis of respecting mutual and peripheral interests. There are other key issues like CPEC, MCC for Nepal, BCIM economic corridor, the trans-Himalayan connectivity, and that are fueling in security dilemma on both side. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhattarai, for your insightful presentation. And I can see that you were trying to balance, from the position of Nepal. Before I, have my concluding remark and open the floor for questions, let me announce once again, is Dr. Maria Adele Carrai there? It appears not. So I think we had a wonderful presentation, but I just wanted to add one or two things and maybe one or two questions before I open this floor for discussion. One, I think China perhaps have come a long way to understand the political, economic, cultural, ecological, and legal risks of the BRI projects. Unlike the initial phase when projects were executed haphazard, I would say, to some extent. Now the projects are weighed for every risk and are subjected to asset liability ratios and return on capital requirements. And if I have understood Professor Wang correctly, it appears that the kind of proliferation of connectivity initiatives we witnessed during the first period, it may not be there during the second period. And I think as far as these debt traps issues are concerned, so they are of serious nature, but I would also like to submit that some of the debt issues have existed before the Chinese investment. And I think, Minhas will agree with me, and maybe some other friends from Sri Lanka or elsewhere, if they are listening or if they are participating in this discussion, they will also agree to this notion that they predate Chinese investment in these areas. So therefore, not necessarily these were related to the BRI. Of course, BRI must have exacerbated these issues, but nonetheless, I personally believe, and that's what my book, where Professor Wolf and Professor Wang, so they have article each. I believe that BRI, it will remain indispensable to globalization, and it will further improve the global supply, value, and industrial chain by strengthening interconnectivity between countries and region, irrespective of various issues, whether they are of political rivalry, whether they are of debt trap, or whether so they are of neo-colonialism, as there is one view as far as this BRI is concerned. I think if we answer the following questions in positive, then I believe BRI is here to stay. One is there economic disequilibrium in global economies across the globe? And if the answer is yes, I think BRI fills some gaps, and then so people, irrespective of various issues, they are likely to join the bandwagon of the Chinese. And second, I would believe that there are issues related to connectivity proliferations, and I think connectivity proliferation is the mantra if you really would like to to take your supply chains across the countries or continent and make it interdependent and make it interdependable on each other. So that is quite important. And I think so BRI here, whether other countries during G7, so they have also initiated the similar plans. It is going to fill that gap also as far as connectivity proliferation is concerned. And finally, I think it is also maybe an antidote, even though China herself will be looking inward, especially in the wake of this dual circulation system, where as at least internal circulation is extremely important and may may take China this way or the other way, because I am a little concerned about one particular thing among the younger generation in China. So this is my question to Professor Wang, and maybe he can try to address it, because a sizable number of Chinese youth at this point in time, which account for almost 40% of the population, if I go by your remarks that almost 400 million people, so they come into the middle class in China. So then there is a new phenomenon which is going on in the society, and how exaggerated it is, or how true is it, but going by the Chinese media reports and responses of the Chinese government, especially Chinese, the media, whether it is electronic or print media. So it appears that it is a serious issue, and that is the issue of, in English, it is, lying flatism. So it is a new vocabulary. In Chinese, we call it Tang Ping Zhui. Professor Wang must be, knowing about this phenomenon in China. So how far exaggerate? That means you are not going to be the part of this consumer class. And Professor Wang, he believes that this class is going to be driving the, this internal circulation as far as economic growth is concerned. So if they are really lying flat and believing in lying flatism, so then there are problems for Chinese society. And another thing, which is relevant, I think, because I read Chinese, I read, the Chinese books and Chinese articles, and I may have a slightly different perspective than those who don't follow Chinese scholarship, those who write in Chinese. And recently, in fact, it is already now 2 months old. Professor Wang must be, knowing Professor Ti Dongshang of Renmin University, Vice Dean of the School of International Relations. So his interview in December and early February this year, so they are very disturbing. And if that is the notion, the way community of shared interest or the Belt and Road is interpreted by Chinese scholars, or maybe media, or maybe in the leadership at the highest echelons, it is really disturbing. And what I gathered from the Wang interview is that, community of shared future for mankind, it is to create a China bubble in place of American bubble, and create almost 5 billion people community across the world in almost 100 cities like Hamanpatota or Godar, where the official language would be Chinese, where the official governance model would be Beijing model. It would be a pluralist society, but it would be the way the Chinese think. And the Aborigine China, it would be away from this bubble. I mean, this new China man, he calls it, Xinzhong Guoren, so he calls it. And these people, or especially the multiculturalism or plurality, it would not be accepted by China in the original China. And so that is, so which I believe, is very, very disturbing. If that is true, maybe it is for all of you to reflect, and maybe Professor Wang can shed some more light. With this, I open the floor for question and answer. I think there are some questions. So maybe Professor Wang, you can go ahead with what you have to respond to my remarks.
Thank you. Firstly, I think the BRI is initiated by Chinese government, but it's not a Chinese projects. Actually, the projects in hosting countries are not using participant country. That's very important. So some panelists asked whether what the future of the BRI. In general, we think what kind of the future of BRI is not just depends on China. It depends on what kind of offer China can provide, or what kind of future that we come on designing. So in general, we think about it's a community of shared future for humankind. That means every country should work together to deal with the common challenge for our humankind. It's not just the individual or the national thinking. And also, basically, on the sovereignty, all the countries can host their destiny in their hands. I think that's very important. So-called the debt trap. Actually, the infrastructure building, of course, that causes debt problem, but it's not a trap. Otherwise, why 140 countries plus 32 international organizations they signed an MOU of BRI cooperation with China? So they are volunteer to do this. Is of course there is no trap, but the debt definitely is a big problem. The G7, so-called the B3W projects, the US even so-called $40 trillion of the invest in so-called the G7 BRI to hedging so-called Chinese BRI. That is met the legitimacy of the US sales inflation. The print too much US dollars is a big trouble for every country. Every crisis, including the global financial crisis, the US solved this crisis, it just print the US dollars and then sells to other countries. So the debt is basically because the US dollar hegemonic power. It's not because of China investment. Actually, the investment to the key infrastructure building want to solve this problem. Like the slogan of the Chinese open reform, if you want to get rich, build the road. If you want to get rich quickly, build the motor road. If you want to get rich immediately, build the digital road. If you want to get rich jointly, and then connect the roads. So that's basically the spirit of the BRI. So how to avoid of the China the investment in infrastructure building not bring with the debts in the future? Actually, the MOU signed and the projects designing actually according to the different countries, they of course pay high attention to that kind of problem. As I mentioned in my presentation, that the BRI at the beginning is more focused on the big infrastructure projects, but now after the pandemic, we are more focused on the light infrastructure, digital infrastructure, cause less debt problem. Because we understand that after the pandemic crisis, many countries' debts increasing rapidly. And China reduced 77 countries' debt on to China end of this year. So it's a very important contribution. But it's still we need economic growth to solve the problem of the debt. So the BRI takes time, particularly for the infrastructure building, takes time to call this to bring of the economic income for the government to solve this problem. So we be patient. And some panelists also mentioned about the Indo-Pacific strategy. The US want to replace China as a water factory, put India as that kind of position, so-called of the Quad, like the vaccines. US innovation produced in India, and Japan donate the money, and Australia provides the sales network. So this is called Quad. But I don't think that India can easily to replace China as a water factory position. Of course, we work on India produce more. As I said, the Chinese comparative advantage in the BRI is comprehensive. Firstly, we have all the categories of the industrial in the under the UN framework. Secondly,
Professor Wang, can you be brief, because we have been joined by one of the speakers who was not there. She has joined now,
okay.
So we would also like to hear to her.
Okay. You mentioned about the so-called Tangping, many Chinese.
Yeah.
That's a hot topic. Even three-child policy, just the initiative, but people don't want to have because it's huge burden for education and housing, everything. So now today's Chinese young generations, they are not working so hard as usual, and they care more about their personal situation, not just the national interests, or even question about the BRI, why we should help other countries to build the infrastructure or industry. So, but BRI is endorsed in the Chinese Communist Party's constitution, and also a 14 5-year plan and 2035 midterm strategies. I think for national, I think it's branch of the BRI. We will definitely continue to. But all of these concerns and worries, we should jointly to consult. I think sooner or later we will have the third BRI forum, maybe next year, or we can more discussions on that after the pandemic crisis, globalization change. So we also need to talk about the transformation of the BRI. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Wang. Since Dr. Maria is with us, so Dr. Maria, can you hear us? I'm giving it over to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry that for some technical issues, I wasn't able to join part of it. I just was able to hear Professor Wang. And so my remarks, like at the beginning, was just about like how the pandemic has affected the BRI, that it had slowed down the project, but it has not stopped it. I will be very, very brief, and then we can just go into the discussion. And I've been studying the BRI for the past 3 years, and I've done work in East Africa, in Chinese financed and built a railroad in Ethiopia and Kenya. And I've been interested also in China and Eastern Europe, so we can discuss more about that later. But basically, my main point is that China has, like the pandemic has accelerated trends that were already there. And so, for instance, there's been a change in emphasis in the digital Silk Road and sustainability, but these trends were kind of already there. And then new emphasis was added on the health Silk Road, and China became a key provider through its BRI routes of masks, health supply, COVID vaccines, and now is increasingly building hospitals. And we also saw an acceleration of some of the issues, so debt repayment and the renegotiation of some of the loans. And here I'm not to say that China is forcing countries into a debt trap, and I think this already emerged, the theme of a debt trap. But I think that like at the beginning when the BRI was launched, there was a lot of enthusiasm and optimism, and probably some of the loans were given without much awareness also of the host country situation. Was like kind of the beginning of China loaning this big amount of money. And also we saw during the pandemic a decrease of overseas lending that already was a trend that was already there. So also this one was accelerated. And this is tied to probably the new emphasis that we saw also in the last BRI forum on sustainability, greening the BRI, doing less projects, but better. And this, I think, is a trend that will continue to be like that. So probably we're going to see less projects, but better projects that are focused more on sustainability, digital kind of infrastructure, and so forth. And the last point I want to make is, of course, like the competition with the US, especially now, Biden, that continue a lot of the approach of Trump toward China, probably making it slightly more predictable. But the US Build Back Better project that can challenge partly China, but I have a lot of doubts whether the US revamping the transatlantic relations will be able to really counter China BRI or creating a parallel BRI. I see, and there already exists a lot of collaboration that is not talked about between private US or European actors and BRI kind of projects. And yeah, this I guess is the big challenge going ahead. And yeah, those were my main remarks about this accelerations of trend that are already there, that BRI is going to stay, and just it will be different, probably less project, less money, but more focused, more sustainable, better projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Maria, for your presentation. So I hope there must be, questions also to you. In fact, we had already started with the question answer sessions. So my small question would be, so what is the response of the East European countries towards this the BRI? Maybe a little later. So let me read some of the direct questions to the panelists. Professor Wang has already addressed some of the concerns, so I think I'll go to Dr. Sultana. So this is a question written by Soumya Nayak. Do you think, I think it is by, not Soumya, but by Ronab Khong Renxing, his Chinese name. So Dr. Sultana, do you think Sri Lanka is repenting for being a part of the BRI? Due to rising debt burden, many African countries have started shying away from BRI projects. So, do Sri Lanka have any such plans? Does Sri Lanka have? Should be. Okay, Sultana, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. No, Sri Lanka as of now doesn't have any such plan, because if you see the current administration, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, he is known for his pro-Chinese approach, and he is the brother of the President Mahinda Rajapaksa, under whose regime Sri Lanka has joined BRI. And Mahinda Rajapaksa is now the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. So they are, in fact, trying to intensify their relations with China, not only in infrastructure development, in other areas as well. And the flagship project, Colombo Port City project, still going on. It's not completed yet, but the reclamation of land has been completed. So Sri Lanka is has already made one law to bring that Colombo Port City project under its sovereign jurisdiction. So they brought this in the parliament. Then there were other amendments were also brought in the constitution, because they have made this Colombo Port City Colombo Port City as a special economic zone, and for that they have made amendments in the constitution. So as of now, if you talk about the current administration, current government of Sri Lanka, they are not repenting, but there are a section on the BRI project in Sri Lanka. You will see the mixed views on this BRI project among the civil society members and opposition parties. So as I mentioned during my presentation, that there are some protests against some of the BRI projects by political parties and civil society members. And there are also civil society members and experts who have criticized the BRI projects. I have observed that their opposition is not so much against the BRI as concept or the project, or against the Chinese. Their opposition is that the way the administration, the Sri Lankan government is dealing with the clauses of while finalizing the clauses, they did not probably, they ignored many things. Then the corrupt practices the government has followed while contracting, while giving contracts to some of the companies for some of related to those projects, and also the strategic repercussions which they are forcing, that because of the BRI projects, it's getting attraction of the other countries like US and India, and that's how unnecessary bringing Sri Lanka into that big power competition. That is, they feel not because of the BRI project, but because the way government is dealing with the Chinese. I mean, government, right now the Sri Lankan government, they are giving an impression that they are pro-Chinese, and their tilt toward Chinese is to counter balance the other powers. So that kind of views, I think, making Sri Lanka vulnerable to this big power competition. So that is the concern when experts and the civil society members in Sri Lanka criticize. So their opposition is more of the way government is dealing with this issues, because they feel there is a potential Sri Lanka can gain lots of benefits from economic benefits. It can be a game changer, particularly Colombo Port City, if government manages it well, and if government deals it well. So that is my answer on this, and I think there are one or two more questions, not directly to me, but
yeah, maybe you can. We will come back later. So at this point in time, Dr. Maria, would you like to intervene? For the question I posed as regards the anxieties or the reception of the East European countries as regards the BRI projects.
Yeah. Yes, so in terms of like Central and Eastern European countries, there is this forum 17+1 that now is back to 16+1, and so they have a kind of special relations with China, but there's not been that big of a flow of investment as toward, for instance, France, Germany, or the UK. And lately there's been increasing concern from, for instance, the Czech Republic, Poland, that are becoming much more critical, and also in terms of public opinion towards China. So there's been a decrease of positive views toward the BRI. Hungary, instead, it seems to be still very, very supportive, and now there's been a discussion, like they're just signed a memorandum of understanding for establishing the first branch of Fudan University in Hungary. But again, that has been very much politicized, and there's been a lot of protests against the establishment of this branch of Fudan University. So I think it's a bit mixed. It's not as it was a few years ago, where there was like this kind of opening, great hopes were seen toward Chinese investments. I think also talking to people, when I spoke to some of the stakeholders and just people, there was a bit of disappointment towards the great promises that people saw there towards BRI, money coming in, and the reality that is is much less, many less investments than what they hope for. And also there is another kind of aspect of the Central and Eastern European countries, the European Union, of course, that is very wary about China influence and China presence in the European Union, and is trying to kind of bring back those countries within European Union. And also ultimately, beside Hungary, I would say that most of these countries, even the Balkans, look more towards Europe than towards China. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I think there are various general questions which I think Professor Wang has already addressed. But there is one question, maybe Professor Wang, if you would like to intervene again. So that is, does BRI set a dangerous precedent of correlating development and financial aid to a country's strategic aims? No, I think you have already answered to that question. In fact, I wanted to ask you another question. That is, the Belt and Road Initiative is one of the biggest projects of China under President Xi Jinping. Do you think the devastating outbreak of COVID-19 threatened to derail the country's most ambitious project? Professor Wang, would you like to take on that briefly?
Yes, thank you. Of course, the pandemic changed the world. People even mention about so-called BC and AC, before coronavirus or after coronavirus. The world changed. BRI and China, everybody should adapt a new world. I think that's very important. So what kind of change? As I mentioned, not just the green, digital, and more people health. I have a new book on the people-oriented globalization. It's not the capital-driven globalization. So I can give you to next time. Also, about other questions, I would like to also mention about this book, answer all the 10 representing questions about BRI. They have the different languages coming out. And sometimes, and Tsinghua University published a textbook, which I'm the editor-in-chief of the BRI theory and practice, also include maybe answer your questions, such as the advisement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In fact, Professor Wang is the most prolific authority on Belt and Road in China since 2014. He has published many books. In fact, some of his books have been translated into Hindi as well in India. And he still keeps on producing just a mass of books and articles on Belt and Road Initiative. So I admire your stamina, Professor Wang, so keep it up. I think Sultana, maybe you can take this one very briefly. What are the views of India about the Belt and Road Initiative, if you may throw some light in? Though it is a very general question, but very briefly.
Yeah, but maybe I'll just, in connection to Sri Lanka's case, I can say, I think India, of course, there is a concern in Sri Lanka, Belt and Road projects in Sri Lanka, because the main concern is that China is getting land on lease. I mean, acquiring land on lease, both in Hambantota Special Economic Zone, they're getting around 15,000 acres of land for 99 years. And also in Colombo Port City project, they are getting land for 99 years. And right now that land will be acquired by the state-owned agency, which are constructing this Colombo Port City, Port City. But they can, in the agreement, there's a clause that they can hand it over to a third party for another 99 years. So though Sri Lankan government has given this commitment that these lands, Sri Lanka will never allow any third party to use these lands to use against India's interest or anybody's interest. But once these lands are acquired by China, we don't know how they are going to use those lands and how much control Sri Lankan government would have once they acquire those lands, even though on lease. So that is a major concern. Given the India-China, the dynamics of India-China relations, I think that is a major concern. So how they are going to use this project, and all the projects which are like strategic in nature, right now they are not being used for military purpose, but for example the ports, they are like dual purpose use. They can be used for dual purpose if they want. They can anytime make it for use it for military purposes. So these things are still unconcerned, but those are the concerns in Sri Lanka, in India.
Thank you. We unfortunately don't have any question for Professor Dr. Minhas. If Professor Minhas, you allow me, so maybe I'll ask you a very small question pertaining to maybe Chinese projects in Gilgit, Baltistan, especially the construction of the dams and the ecological concerns, so the safety of these dams, because the area is fragile. And also the energy-related projects which China is undertaking inside Pakistan, and most of these are believed to be coal fueled. So what are the concerns of the local people as far as these projects are concerned? If you are listening me.
Yes, sir, you're audible. Sir, am I audible to you?
Yes, please go ahead.
So the session is over from your end?
Or no, I think I thought that I'm talking to Professor Minhas. So it appears that Professor Minhas is not there, and I think there were some more general questions. I think we will not delve into those. And as far as my final comments are concerned, I think I have already flagged them out. And if that is the case, I will thank all the panelists for their wonderful presentations, wonderful perspectives, from different countries, regions. It was really enriching discussion, and I learned a lot, even though I have written a little bit about BRI, but not much. It was really enlightening, and I thank you all for your participation and deliberation. I also thank the audience for intervening and asking those pretty good questions to our panelists. So with this, I think we have come to the end of this session. We still have 4 minutes, but I think we can close it at this point in time. So we are pretty well within the time. Over to the host.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being a part of this particular session. It was an absolutely great session, and I'm sure that the audience loved listening to you all as well. It was so nice. And now I just hand over the session to Nimesh for the vote of thanks. So Nimesh, the session is all yours.
Thank you, Paki.
Thank you.
Yes.
Distinguished Chair, speakers, ladies and gentlemen, as we have come to the end of this session, we would like to express our sincere gratitude and thanks to the Chair for agreeing to chair and moderate the session today. Our sincere thanks also goes to all the speakers for being a part of the event and delivering such comprehensive and convincing presentations. We would like to acknowledge our gratitude to our friends from the diplomatic community, experts, academia, media, and different organizations. Finally, we must also mention our deep sense of appreciation for the audience who participated in the webinar and those who are watching us live. Thank you for your valuable time and attention, and for making this session productive with your questions. Once again, we are truly honored to have you all with us today. Please do join us in the next session. Thank you so much.